Okay, so this lecture is about chapter 22, which is about the early 20th century, which is a really interesting period in art history. It's sort of the real beginning of what we call modernism in the arts, including abstraction. So I think you'll find this different and interesting. Um, the early 20th century in Europe was a really uh, busy time for visual artists, especially innovative visual artists. And it was interrupted a few years late after it was just going good when World War One started and kind of caused it to sort of grind to a halt, which is sad. It sort of makes you wonder what would have happened if World War One had not devastated Europe, especially France, where a lot of this innovation was going on. But World War One had its own effect on art history, so we're going to study that next week. Excuse me. But this week it's all about uh, chapter 22, two art movements mainly, Fauvism slash Expressionism, and then on Wednesday, oh wait, this is Wednesday. Next Monday, it'll be about Cubism. So those are the two main sort of early 20th century art movements that um, you need to figure out and learn about. Okay, so first we're going to talk, but the topic for today is Fauvism, which is a type of Expressionism. So Expressionism is a bigger category that means vivid use of color, really saturated color uh, for emotional effect. And people, you can be an expressionist now. In fact, we talked earlier in the course about Jean-Michel Basquiat, and a lot of people call him a neo-expressionist because of his use of color and the way he drew with color and so on. So expressionism is still a thing. Fauvism was a sort of short-lived art movement. So I always project this slide, although it sometimes alarms people. So I'm sorry if it seems overly complicated, and maybe it is, but it you don't have to sort of understand all of it to get something out of it. So here is the art movement that we're talking about today, Fauvism, which started in 1905 and lasted about 10 years. It derived from the work of Van Gogh and Gauguin, who were post-impressionists, and we're going to talk about them in a few minutes. There's a little sign here that's covering up I hope you can see it. Anyway, first we have to talk about post-impressionism, which is the sort of root teacher, you could say, of the Fauve painters. Fauvism, it they were called les fauves, which means the wild beasts in French, and then that became Fauvism. But why were they called the wild beasts? Well, you'll see in a minute. Okay, so all right, so again, the influences on the Fauves were the Post-Impressionists. The Post-Impressionists were 19th century painters, late 19th century painters, who, as the name implied, came after the Impressionists like Monet, um, Berthe Morisot, Mary Cassatt, and those people. So there are four main post-impressionist painters, but we're only gonna really pay attention to two of them today, and that's Van Gogh and Gauguin. Post-impressionism is not a homogeneous style. That is, the painting, even though Van Gogh and Gauguin were friends, they and painted together sometimes, their styles were very different. So it's not like Impressionism, where an Impressionist painting by Monet looks kind of like one by Mary Cassatt. It's not really like that, but they were united in their allegiance to the idea of self-expression. That is, if you think about an impressionist painting, it's kind of impersonal. It's not really about Monet or his feelings about something or his take on something. It's he goes out there into the landscape and just records what he sees, almost like a sophisticated camera. A sort of fuzzy camera, not very sharp camera, like a pinhole camera or something. But he's trying to just reproduce the exact colors and weather situations that he sees. Van Gogh and Gauguin and Cézanne, who we'll talk about on Monday, rejected that idea. And so Post-Impressionism is a more personal and subjective way of painting. So what we're looking at right now is this self-portrait by Van Gogh, and it's a very unusual self-portrait. I think you probably have most people have never seen a self-portrait like this. First of all, Van Gogh really emphasizes the skull-like shape of his head. It's almost like he's imagining himself as a skull already. Plus, he models the volumes of his head using colors that you wouldn't normally think of as being appropriate for portraiture, like green. This kind of acid green that he uses to create the contours of his cheekbones and the shadow on this side of his face, all of that, and under his neck, all of that is a little weird and different, definitely. But his goal here was to do something different from what a Renaissance artist would do. A Renaissance artist would use chiaroscuro, modeling from light to dark to create the volumes of the face. And instead of using sort of a darker brown color over here, the local color of the skin of a European person is sort of pinkish brown, you could say. So my hand here in the light looks light pinkish brown, and my face over here in the shadow looks darker pinkish brown. That's sort of the normal way to model the shape of the head. But Van Gogh has not done anything like that. He's even using weird sort of purple colors, a kind of light violet in the highlight on his skull here. Some of this is a little hard to see in a PowerPoint slide, so I would suggest that you watch the video that's linked to in the content on the Khan Academy site about this self-portrait, and especially the part of the video that zooms in on the eye here. It's just an amazing act of painting. It looks so real. It looks naturalistic. I think most people would agree. But when you zoom in, you see all these really thick brush strokes and kind of wild colors that from a distance it resolves clearly into a man's face and a kind of he's exaggerated the curve of his eye to make himself look more Asian, because at this point in his life he was a big admirer of Japanese prints, and he liked to imagine what it would be like if he'd been born in Japan, if he was a Japanese person. So that's why his eyes kind of look like he imagined a Japanese person might appear. So yeah, watch that video and notice the use of color to create the modeling of the head, which was a really daring and innovative thing to do. Okay, so for Van Gogh, color was kind of everything. And in fact, about this painting of his bedroom in the little town of Arles, where he went to um, create a sort of painter's retreat spot with Gauguin, but then they had a big fight and a falling out. Anyway, he rented a house there, and this is a painting of his bedroom in this house. And he wrote to his sister, or maybe to his brother Theo, in this painting, color has to do everything. So the color in a Van Gogh painting is often super saturated. So let's just think back to what we learned about color in chapter 3. So a saturated color is a color that that's pure, very pure. It's not mixed with its opposite on the color wheel. Maybe he used it squeezed straight from the tube. He didn't mix. Maybe he didn't mix this red with any other colors before he used it on the canvas. So, and this goldish color here, it's like a heightened version of the natural color of wood. So an expressionist painter like Van Gogh would look at the landscape and see maybe a brown, a sort of slightly goldish brown, and just amp that up a notch or two as far as the saturation and purity of the hue goes. That is, instead of mixing colors on a palette, oil colors on a painting palette, to look more like they look out in the world, the expressionist painter would just interpret that color and maybe heighten the color and for emotional effect, not so much to imitate what we see out there in the world. So this is Van Gogh's most famous painting, which most people are aware of. And I think you can see pretty clearly here this expressionist use of color and just the subjectivity that this landscape painting is imbued with. So Van Gogh normally painted, as the French say, sur le motif, that is, or en plein air, that is, outside, in front of whatever he was painting. Although sometimes he painted from reproductions or prints, and we'll see one of those in a minute. But in this case, this was after he had his mental breakdown where he mutilated part of his ear, famously, and he was confined to a mental hospital and in the south of France. And but he was encouraged to paint while he was in this mental hospital. And but he rarely ventured very far from the mental hospital. So this painting is one of the few that he painted kind of from memory and imagination as well as from observation. So you can see that it's partly based on the landscape around the mental hospital. And there's a sort of a town down here in this valley, you could say. And then these amazing cypress trees, the forms of which he's kind of stylized and exaggerated and abstracted a little bit. But the most amazing part is his depiction of the night sky, which I think must have been just astounding to people in the late 19th century. We've seen this painting so much. I mean, you can get a jigsaw puzzle of this painting, and it's in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, so Americans can go see it. So we've seen it so much that maybe we don't realize how incredible and innovative this is. But what he did was he did observe stars very closely. We know this because he wrote a letter to his sister about his observation of stars from his window in the mental hospital. So I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but once you get away from cities, and cities like Paris were already being lit up with gas lights at night. So street lights existed in Paris, although they probably weren't as bright as the street lights that we have now, or the lights that light up highways and so on. But they did have those. But if you got out away from a city like Paris and you were in a small town like Van Gogh was, there's virtually no light coming from the buildings or from the streets, and the sky can be very intense. And I remember seeing this in West Texas when I lived in Texas and went camping in West Texas. There was no interference at all from human-made lights on the ground, which make it harder to see the stars. And the sky was just this sort of light show of stars rotating through the sky during the night. And what Van Gogh observed, as he wrote in this letter, was that stars are not all the same color. He wrote, "Some stars are lemony, others have a pink, green, or forget-me-not blue glow." So you can actually see this right now. If you go out and look at the night sky right after dark and you look sort of to the east, you'll see a planet. I think it's Mars, and it looks pink. So that's what Van Gogh wanted to sort of talk about, you could say, in this painting, was the varying colors of the stars. So you can see he painted this one kind of more gold yellow and this one a lighter color yellow. And then he surrounded these stars by these sort of halos of light that I think that's just sort of imagined, you know. And what is this? Is this supposed to be the Milky Way, or is this supposed to be the wind that's blowing these cypress trees around? And what is all this? I mean, this is all sort of abstract representations of Van Gogh's feeling about the night sky, I think, about the movement in the night skies. This maybe as the stars rotate around through the night, which they do. It's easy to see if you're camping outside and you don't put up your tent for whatever reason and you're just lying on the ground and looking up and you fall asleep for a while and then you wake up and the stars have moved because the earth is rotating. Stars are relatively stable, actually, but because of the revolution of the planet, what you see is different every 2 hours when you wake up. So maybe that's what he was getting at. But he drew this sort of aura or halo around the stars and around the moon here that definitely kind of implies a kind of dynamism and movement in the night sky that I think is amazing and fascinating, and kind of goes with the liveliness of this tree here that almost seems to be an animal of some sort, or maybe a type of seaweed that's kind of undulating underwater, in contrast to the sort of static roofs and steeples of this town down here. So the way Van Gogh put paint on the canvas really thickly like this is called impasto. I think we talked about that a little bit when I was talking about the paint as a medium. And you can really see that if you see this painting in person, how thick the paint is. I mean, it makes you want to reach out and, touch the painting, but of course you can't do that. This one, it may actually have glass over it to prevent that. But a lot of oil paintings don't have glass over them, and so there's a real temptation to touch them to see how thick the paint is. But you're not allowed, obviously. Okay, here's another example of a painting I think was made around the same time when Van Gogh was confined to the mental hospital. And I think it illustrates pretty well this expressionist use of color. That is, what you see is not what you get, you could say. Like, if you were at this spot in real life, he calls it enclosed wheat field with rising sun. Okay, so here's a stone wall, it looks like, surrounding, and this is a wheat field with some flowers, poppies maybe growing in with it. And then in the distance, some olive trees, probably, maybe some more poppy fields, and some houses, and this incredible yellow sun here. Sort of reminds me of that Grateful Dead song. The wind in the willows played T for two. The sky was yellow and the sun was blue. So he paints the sky yellow as well as the sun. I mean, if you weren't thinking about it too much, you might just go, "Oh yeah, sun's yellow, sky blue." But Van Gogh's looking at, when at sunset or sunrise, sometimes this is really how it looks. So it's not as if his painting has nothing to do with the way things really look at all. It is based on how things really look. It's just things how they really look sort of filtered through the subjectivity of the expressionist painter. So for example, this okay, the sun's over here and it's sort of lighting up the top of this brick or stone wall. But on the interior, obviously, there's a shadow, right? He sort of painted that shadow. And this interior side of the wall is in shadow. But instead of painting it like dark gray, like a person who was sort of literal minded, more literal minded painter might do, he's painted it blue. So maybe it looked slightly blue, but he sort of amped up the blue, you could say. He's dialed it to 11. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie. It's a parody. It's a parody of a rock documentary. I can't remember the name of it right now, but they have an amp, and they talk about our amp goes to 11. So that's sort of what Van Gogh does. He turns everything up to 11, which I've also been accused of doing, and I plead guilty. I like to take things to 11. I wish I could remember that. Well, maybe I'll remember it later, the name of that movie. Yeah, so the color is taken to 11. I don't know what he would have done if he was a musician. Taken it to 11, I guess. All right, so here's another painting that's sort of taken to 11, you could say. And Van Gogh said, again, in one of his letters, he wrote a lot of letters to Theo, his brother, and apparently some to his sister as well, that he wanted this painting to convey a sense of sadness and even tragedy. I don't know if I would have gotten that from it right off the bat. I really love this painting. I think it's cool. It looks like a thunderstorm is coming and the crows are kind of flying away from this. Oh, I remember the name of the movie. It's Spinal Tap. If you haven't ever watched that movie, it's called This is Spinal Tap, and it's a parody of a rock documentary. All right, so back to Van Gogh. All right, so this is a crossroads near where he lived in Arles, and the wheat field is here, and the crows are drawn almost with the same type of brushstroke as the wheat, which is kind of interesting. These little hatch marks, sort of V-shaped marks that he draws the wheat blowing in the wind right before the thunderstorm. It looks very similar to the way he drew the crows, and even the way he painted the clouds, the thunder clouds here. It's clear that's what they are, even though it's very abstracted. Okay, so Van Gogh, like a lot of French painters of the late 19th century, was really enamored of and influenced by Japanese prints, woodblock prints. So on the right, you see an actual Japanese woodblock print. I'm not sure who the artist is, maybe Hokusai. And these were suddenly available in France, and they were kind of cheap prints that you could buy like at these book stalls that they still have in Paris along the side, outdoor book stalls where booksellers set up these stalls and you can browse and buy used books and prints and things. And even if you were a poor artist, which Van Gogh was, he only ever sold one painting in his entire life. He was mainly sort of supported by his brother Theo, who was an art dealer and who believed in Van Gogh's work and the value of it. And Theo constantly sent him money so that Van Gogh could buy paint and so on. But he was always kind of living on a shoestring. But he could buy these prints because they were very affordable. And he would take them home and copy them. So on the left, you could see his copy of this print of these flowering plum trees. And his copy is in oil. This is ink done. I mean, it's a whole, how these Japanese woodblock prints are made is a whole other topic. It's really interesting, and I wish we could have gotten into it when we were going over Asian art, but we really didn't have time. But it's a whole topic that you can look into if you're interested. So why was it that French artists in the late 19th century were so interested in Japanese prints? Well, one reason is that it's partly just the sort of daring composition that seemed so un-European in Japanese prints. Like just the idea of thrusting into the foreground this weird branch of a tree that kind of needs pruning, right? It's got these water sprouts that probably should come out. Maybe. If I were pruning it, I would take those out. So, or maybe I would take this one out. I'm not sure, but there's too many branches here, and they sort of need to be pruned. And the artist, the Japanese artist, has put that front and center, and in the background, sort of in the negative spaces, there's people, maybe a few people, not really drawn very carefully, and then other plum trees, and then the sky is pretty radical. I mean, it's not blue. It's this weird orange color, and then that sort of fades to white here. And I think all of that seemed very exciting to French artists in the late 19th century. And also the relative flatness of the masses. That is, a tree branch is like that big around, and it's a volume, it's three-dimensional, but the artist has not gone to a whole lot of trouble to make it look three-dimensional. Okay, there's a little bit of modeling here, but this branch is perfectly flat. This is pretty much flat. The ground plane here with the grass is flat. Not much effort has gone into making it recede in space in any way, or make these trees a different color, or so they look like they're further away. It's all just flat. And that was one of the things about Japanese art that really intrigued these post-impressionist painters, and it had a huge effect later on the 20th century, early 20th century art that we'll get to in a minute. Okay, so Van Gogh's friend and fellow artist Gauguin was also interested in changing the way European painting was going. So instead of the Renaissance ideal of sort of perspectival space with three-dimensional, anatomically accurate figures in it, Gauguin was also interested in flattening the canvas and acknowledging the fact that it is indeed a flat canvas with paint on it. It's not really a window into a three-dimensional world as a Renaissance painter or an academic painter would want you to believe. So, or even an Impressionist painter to some degree. I mean, the Impressionist painters, again, the reason Gauguin and Van Gogh are post-impressionists is that they're not working on the same project as a person like Monet was working on, which was about, Monet was trying to transcribe momentary effects of light and color with little, what he called taches, or little dabs of paint. Gauguin and Van Gogh are not doing that at all. They're more interested in sort of abstract shapes and taking three-dimensional masses in reality and flattening them into two-dimensional shapes, into flat planes of flat unmodulated planes of non-mimetic color. I think I wrote all that out on one of the slides, and we'll unpack that later. But okay, let's just talk about what's going on in this painting. What is it supposed to be? Okay, so, and sorry, this should be italicized, obviously, because it's the title of the painting. The Vision After the Sermon. So what is this about? So Gauguin had spent a lot of time in a part of France called Brittany, which is on the west coast of France. And it was considered a kind of part of France that was not as modern and cosmopolitan as Paris or other urban parts of France. It was sort of a country place. And as Gauguin saw it, the people that lived there had a very pre-modern kind of religious faith. And the women in Brittany wore these distinctive starched linen caps. So he imagines that these women have come out of their church having heard a sermon about Jacob wrestling with the angel. So this is a story from the Old Testament where Jacob, one of the Israelites, had a wrestling match with an angel. So they come out of their church and they imagine that this wrestling match is taking place in the sort of town square in front of their church. And I read, I don't know if this is true, but I read somewhere that there were sort of entertainments after church in small European towns like this, and some of them involved, cockfighting and stuff like that. So it may be that there really was a lot going on after church in the sort of plaza in front of the church. Maybe, there were farmers market stalls and maybe sort of circus type acts and acrobatics and maybe cockfighting. But in Gauguin's story here, these women come out of the church and whatever is going on in the plaza, they imagine in their minds that it's the story they just heard. I mean, some of them, their eyes are still closed, right? So what's happening out here is more in their imagination than it is what's actually happening. And again, there's this branch sort of cutting in front of in the middle foreground or middle ground here, a lot like this plum tree branch. So Gauguin has learned some of the lessons of Japanese prints also, especially the flattening quality. So he's tilted the ground up. Okay, so in a normal Renaissance painting, if you're looking at a scene from behind some people's heads, which you probably wouldn't in a Renaissance painting, you'd see their faces, then the scene would be set up like with a vanishing point and a horizon, and it would look like a three-dimensional scene where the orthogonals converge on the horizon. Well, Gauguin has thrown all that out the window, and now the ground plane has been tilted up. So it's almost like you're seeing this scene from two points of view, from behind the heads of these women and kind of down like a drone or something. And so up here you have this scene of the angel. He's got actual wings wrestling with this person, Jacob, from the Old Testament. And then there's a cow or a goat over here. Why is that there? No real reason for that. But you can see how much trouble and sort of pleasure Gauguin took with just drawing and painting these shapes of the starched linen caps. I mean, that's kind of what this painting is about for me, is the shape of these caps. But they don't really play a part in the story, right? They're just an exercise in kind of flat, unmodulated planes of non-mimetic color. I mean, it may be reasonably mimetic in the sense that the linen is white and it might have little gray shadows on it or something. But why is this ground bright red? I mean, maybe the soil or the cobblestones in this town are sort of brownish red, but again, Gauguin has taken it to 11. You know, he's turned up the color, sort of made it super saturated here. Okay, so Maurice Denis, who was an art critic at this time, wrote, well, sometimes these painters are, in addition to being called post-impressionists, some of them are called synthetists. That's not really so important, but this is what Maurice Denis said. It's well to remember that a picture, before being a battle horse, a nude woman, or some anecdote, is essentially a flat surface covered with colors assembled in a certain order. Okay, that idea would govern most of the 20th century in painting. So that was like a new idea. Hey, wait a minute. Let's just admit that that's what oil painting is. It's a two-dimensional surface with some color on it. It's not really a window, as Renaissance painters wanted us to believe. Okay, so now we're leaving the 19th century and going into the early 20th century, where Fauvism, the wild beasts, who are basically part of a larger art movement called Expressionism, came into being around 1905. So Gauguin's advice is echoing in the ears of the early 20th century painters like Matisse and Derain. And what Gauguin said is, how do you see these trees? They are yellow. So put in yellow, not green, because you think that a tree's leaves are green. This shadow, rather blue, paint it with pure ultramarine. That is pure blue, not toned down blue. See these red leaves? Put in vermilion, the brightest red you've got in your paint box. So just go for it. So Matisse, the most prominent of the Fauve artists in France and in Paris, took this advice to heart and made this kind of, for the time, shocking painting. And I think even for people nowadays, this painting is difficult. You know, it's like, okay, it's a woman with a crazy hat on. Why is there green on her nose? It looks like she has green snot coming out of her nose. Well, Matisse has just taken the lessons of Van Gogh, who figured out you could model the face with colors like green. You're not restricted to the skin tones, you know. Let's just push the envelope a little here. So when I've looked at this painting a lot, but it did take me a while to kind of figure out what's what. So I'll just tell you what I think is going on here. Okay, clearly the face is here. Now, women in the early 20th century did wear really large hats with, you know, feathers and fake fruit and all kind of things on the hat. So that part is not unrealistic, and it must have been really fun to paint those hats. I mean, if I could get somebody to sit around for me wearing a hat like that, I would be very happy. So I could draw them. But what else is going on? Okay, so bourgeois women of this social class might also be carrying a fan, a sort of unfold, you know, like you've probably seen a paper fan that unfolds. So she's got a glove on and she's holding a fan and maybe a handkerchief or something. And so the handle of the fan is right here and her gloved hand is here. And then there's a kind of tassel on the fan also. And I think this is her belt maybe. And maybe this is part of the chair. I'm not really sure what's going on there. And that could be her other hand. But it took me a while to figure out that this was actually a fan. So she's like fanning herself. Now, it's almost like Matisse made a promise to himself that he was going to use every color in his paint box, no matter what. And not only that, but he was going to use it on her face. So where he's used green to kind of model the shadow on the other side of her nose. I mean, you can see, like if you see a person in 3/4, this is frontal, this is profile, and this is 3/4. So it's a person in 3/4 view. And of course, this side of their face away from the light is going to be darker. And so it makes sense to model that and put a line here. And he's done that, except that the weird thing is the line is green. And then there's a little shadow under her hat here that he's also made with green. But then he made the shadow under her neck orange. Like he's not even being consistent here. Unless that's supposed to be part of her dress. I don't know. And then in the background, it's these kind of random patches of color, but they're not really random. One thing I think that is going on here is the use of complementary colors. That is, colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel. So because he used a deep blue here, he's going to use this kind of gold, light yellow or gold color in the background because it's a complementary color. And something like that may be going on here with the choice of green here. I mean, it's not everywhere. Like this purple is not complementary to the blue, it's analogous. But the use of complementary colors to sort of make colors pop more is a part of Expressionism. And that may be the logic behind this bright orange belt. But this is a perfect example of Fauvism, the kind of intense color that's not mimetic. That is, it doesn't copy what we see in the real world. It's expressionist color. Okay, so I put, now if we were doing this class in person, I probably would have given you a handout with some of Matisse's sort of maxims or ideas about painting on the handout, and I would have written some of this on the whiteboard, so I just put it in a slide. So the word fauve means the wild beast in French, and here's that phrase I was using: flat, unmodulated. That means not changing, just flat color. Like not, if I was painting this, if I was trying to paint this sweatshirt in a kind of Renaissance way, I would darken, the folds here. If I were doing it in an expressionist way, it would just be flat, no modulation, no folds. So unmodulated planes of non-mimetic, not mimetic means copying nature. So not copying nature. Fauvism derives from the work of Van Gogh and Gauguin that we already looked at, who were 19th century post-impressionists, but it only lasted a few years. However, expressionism, the use of color to create a mood based on subjectivity, that's still a style. Anybody can become an expressionist. You could be an expressionist today if you wanted to. You could make you go outside, look at some of the trees and go, okay, I see that sort of gold color on that maple tree. I'm going to make it like Val's orange. That would be expressionist. Okay, so Matisse says, what characterized Fauvism was that we rejected imitative colors, and that with pure colors we obtained stronger reactions. That is, colors straight from the tube, not mixed with other colors. Okay. All right, so here we go with Matisse. I misspelled it, sorry. There should be an S there. Matisse. Okay, so this is a good example of flat planes of unmodulated color and the rejection of Renaissance perspective and deep space and the the human figure that looks like, a real person in real space. This is decorative, right? It's more, it seems to be more about the subject matter here, which is ostensibly a woman kind of setting the table in a bourgeois home with a window that looks out onto a garden, or maybe this is a painting. We don't know. That's what it seems to be about, but really what it's about, I think, are these patterns. The pattern on the tablecloth and the pattern on the wallpaper, which match. That's how you know it's a bourgeois home. When I was a kid in the 60s, my grandmother had a lot of wallpaper in her house, and I was kind of fascinated by wallpaper. I spent a lot of time looking at that wallpaper. She didn't have any matching tablecloths that matched the wallpaper, but that would have been cool. So we can sort of assume that, maybe that existed in early 20th century France. But, an impressionist painter, and Matisse could paint like an impressionist or even like a Renaissance painter, or an academic painter. An academic style painter would have made the edge of the table here obvious, right? Instead, Matisse has kind of ignored that edge. Maybe this curves over the edge a little bit, but he didn't try to draw the way the tablecloth sort of falls over the edge, either in front or over here. Nor did he try to make this wall look like it was behind the tablecloth. It's exactly the same color red as the tablecloth. It's just, it's not in a shadow or anything like that. He actually left off the leg of the chair here, which makes the chair look like it's just a decoration. It's just flat too. It's not even a three-dimensional chair. And this poor woman might as well be a paper doll, right? She's just a flat cutout of a person. She's not, and if you look at some other paintings by Matisse from earlier, you know that he could paint a convincing three-dimensional person setting the table. I saw that. I think it's in the Khan Academy article about this painting, maybe. But one of the most mysterious parts, okay, just before we get to the mysterious window here, what about the fruit? Now, one of the first things you learn in art school when you're learning to draw is your teacher will get an orange or something, put it on the table, and shine a light on the orange. And you're supposed to draw the way the orange is, the shadow on the orange is created by the light. And that teaches you how to model forms in two dimensions. How to, the beginnings of chiaroscuro, really, and of the illusion of three-dimensionality on a two-dimensional surface. Well, and Matisse knew how to do that. He's just like, I'm tired of that. I'm not into that anymore. So he just makes this fruit absolutely perfectly flat. This is not this sort of, I don't know what you call these things. It's a fancy silver thing to hold fruit. He tilts that up. It's not drawn in correct perspective, really. The perspective is not consistent. Not because he didn't know how to do it, because he just didn't do it. But this thing here is the most mysterious. Like when we discuss this in class, sometimes I ask people how many people think it's a window onto a yard, like a garden, with very abstracted fruit trees in bloom. And some people think that it is. Some people think this is the windowsill. So, in France, not all windows had glass. Sometimes they just had shutters. So if the shutters were open, this could be a window with a very deep windowsill and a stone house with stone walls or brick walls. Some people think this is a painting, and this is the frame around the painting, and it could be. I think it's a window. To me, it reads more as a window for some reason. And if it is a window, then these are, the most abstracted trees possible, except this weird bush here, which it almost seems like he went back to trying to, it's not consistent, right? Like this bush is more like a sort of academic landscape bush. And these fruit trees or whatever they are more like early 20th century abstraction. So, it can't be decided definitively. Okay, so, but it was this painting, Le Bonheur de Vivre, or The Joy of Life is the translation, that really put Matisse on the map. Oops, I can't believe I've already used up an hour. How can that be? And the reason it was so it became so famous was that some American collectors, the Steins, Gertrude Stein and Leo Stein, bought it and put it in their apartment, and everybody saw this painting and were just blown away by it. It was the most radical and innovative painting anybody had ever seen. So there's a lot to say about this painting, and I'll try to unpack it for you. Okay, so like the other two Matisse paintings that we just looked at, the color is not naturalistic, right? It's expressionist color. It's not mimetic. It doesn't look like nature. So instead of green grass, there's yellow grass and purple grass. And instead of green trees, there's orange trees or gold trees. You could say, well, maybe this is fall. No, because why is this tree flowering? This looks like a crabapple that's in flower or something. Well, you can't tell what time of year it is because it's not a real time and a real space. It's a kind of mythological space. And that's not, of course, unheard of in French art. The Louvre is full of paintings of people in doing things in mythological time with goddesses and so on. But that sort of painting had disappeared, at least from avant-garde painting in France for a while, ever since Courbet said, show me an angel and I'll paint an angel. Advanced art or progressive or avant-garde artists were not painting mythology or a mythological past. So Matisse is sort of going back to that in a way, that sort of academic interest in mythology or an idealized past. But he's certainly not doing it the way an academic artist would have done it. So one of the first things that people notice, besides the weird color here, is the weird scale. Like you have a couple smooching down here in the lower right corner, and then two women, naked women, which is, again, not out of line at all for French art or advanced European art generally. Here they are in the middle ground. So you have a pretty clear foreground, middle ground, and background. So much is normal for academic art. But the scale of the figures is off. Like these women are almost as big as this woman. What's that about? This could be a kid. We don't know. But she's smaller than these people. And then this person seems to be sort of between these tiny people in the background and these people, but she's not really on the right scale. She or he is really not on the right scale. And then so it's not really about trying to create a realistic deep space here with figures receding in size as you go into the background. It's more about the lines, and Matisse has really emphasized the lines here, the contours, as we say in figure drawing, of the figures, and they're pretty much of a piece with these with the way he's drawn the trees. That is, he hasn't really made a huge distinction between the trees and the people. So that's pretty different too. Now, Matisse was very familiar with the paintings in the Louvre, including this Ingres painting from the early 19th century, Grand Odalisque. So, I mean, this is not realistic in one sense. I mean, her spine is way too long and so on. But it's sort of purports to be more realistic than Matisse's abstraction here. But what he's doing is he's referencing Ingres. So let's look back here. So the curve of this woman's hip echoes this sort of huge hip here of Ingres' Odalisque. So he's referencing that. He's also referencing an older painting by Titian, a Renaissance painting, that again shows that theme that I talked about in the last lecture, the fête champêtre, the party in the fields. So this shows a tribe of Romans called the Adrians having a feast, bacchanal, that is, they're drinking a lot of wine. And this woman, I think she's had enough. It's time for her to go home. And this baby is about to pee on her also. So he also saw this painting in the Louvre, and you can see that he's maybe referencing that painting with this figure here. It's even in the same part of the canvas. So he's making a lot of references to academic painting, but mixing it up. He's also referencing, let's be honest, some post-impressionist painting, more recent painting. He had seen the Cézanne retrospective in Paris, and we'll talk about Cézanne in the next lecture. Cézanne also wanted to treat this old theme of bathers, that is, nude women in the landscape, which is an old theme in European art. And so, but Cézanne has done it in a very sort of avant-garde way, right? In a way that's kind of disturbing in a way, because the bodies of the women don't look naturalistic. This shoulder and these shoulders and arms don't look like academic figure drawing. They look more like trees, really. He sort of unified, again, the landscape and the figures here, so that this woman's body almost looks like a tree trunk. Well, Matisse has done a similar thing, making the bodies and the trees all of a piece, the same sort of style of curvy line. It's just that his style of unifying the composition is different from Cézanne's more blocky kind of style. And again, the scale is totally skewed. The lines sort of outlining the contours of the figures are not representational or naturalistic. They're more about line and color and shape, the purely formal aspects of art, not the mimetic, illusionistic style of art. Okay, so we have time to discuss one more painting before we quit. Okay, so this painting, there's a video about it in the content, and I think you should watch that video because, again, it zooms in on the details of the painting, and I think you can understand the point a little better if you could zoom in on it. But I'll try to sort of summarize the points that the video makes. So if the whole goal of Fauvism and Expressionism is to demolish Renaissance rules about perspective and the human figure in space, Matisse has done his darndest to make that happen in this painting, and it's up to you to sort of figure out whether he succeeded or not. So this subject matter, the studio of the painter, is a common trope in Western or European art. It's not unusual for a painter to make a painting of his studio, his or her studio, and sometimes of his or herself painting in the studio. This time Matisse is not there, but you can see some of his work is here. Okay, so this is supposed to be a room. He tells you it's the red studio. But he's kind of, again, his goal is to flatten things out, to demolish three-dimensional linear perspective, and to make a decorative, formal arrangement of shapes and colors and lines and so on. So his first strategy in destroying Renaissance illusionism is to use this same red color everywhere. Now, red is a warm color that kind of comes forward theoretically, right? So if you want a shape to come forward, you make it a warm color like red. If you want it to recede into the background, you use blue or bluish green or purple or something like that. So if you were a Renaissance painter, you would have made the back wall a sort of bluish red. Even if it was actually painted red, you would make it a sort of darker bluish red, and the floor here, even if it was also red, you would make that sort of come forward by painting it more orangey red. So that would be a classic way to make this wall sort of recede. But Matisse didn't do that. It's all the same red. So it almost seems like this is as in your face as this is right here. So where's the deep space? Okay, so the other trick of illusionism in academic art and Renaissance art is, as we learned, one-point linear perspective. So you would set up a kind of, in your mind, a horizon line with a vanishing point somewhere, and you would make well, for example, he sort of did that with the table. You could say that the vanishing point is, if you follow these orthogonals, that maybe the vanishing point is back here somewhere. But the chair is all wrong, okay? Even if the chair is not lined up with the table, the front edge of the chair should be smaller than the back edge of the chair, so that there would be some kind of orthogonals converging to a different vanishing point on the same horizon line. But instead, unless this is just bad carpentry, the chair is just all wonky, and so it doesn't create any sort of illusion of deep space at all. So, and also, I mean, if you were an academic painter or a Renaissance painter, you would draw the corner here. Okay, here's the floor line, here's the other floor line. So where those two planes come together, you would draw a line to make sure people know that there's a corner there. And so this is a room with deep space. Well, Matisse didn't do that. So he's breaking all the rules and making this room just look flat. But nevertheless, when you see the painting, you read it visually as a room. So he's sort of foiled in his plan to flatten everything out. So he's got one more trick up his sleeve. And this is hard to see in a slide. You kind of have to see the real painting to see it. But if you watch the video, you might get a sense of it. All right, so his last trick is the reserve line. So what is a reserve line? It's not just in this little chest of drawers in the background. He's used the reserve line on the chair, on the table, on these kind of stools back here, and the grandfather clock or whatever it is. All right, so what's a reserve line? Well, if you've ever painted a room, like with house paint, interior house paint, you probably bought some blue masking tape and you masked out the trim, right? So you wouldn't paint the trim in case the trim was a different color. So essentially, it's what Matisse did was he painted the canvas yellow first, and then instead of painting these yellow lines on top of the red, he painted right up to what are called the reserve lines. So he just left these lines here. I don't think he put actual masking tape down to mask them while he painted the red part. But what that does is the yellow lines are actually underneath the red lines. So let's go back to the chair here. So these lines that describe the contours of the chair are actually under the background. So that's confusing, right? So this leg and the seat of the chair should be in front of the floor here, but instead they're sort of underneath the color of the floor. Like here's the floor, here's the edge of the chair, but the yellow line is under that. And you can see that when you're looking at the painting in person. So again, the viewer is slightly flummoxed by this, supposedly. We just have to take the art historian's word for it. I believe it, though. Okay, so what's the rationale behind all this? So Matisse says, what I'm after above all is expression. Expression, for me, does not reside in passions glowing in a human face. The entire arrangement of my picture is expressive. The place occupied by the figures, the empty spaces around them, the proportions, everything has its share. Composition is the art of arranging in a decorative manner the diverse elements at the painter's command. So that's what we talked about when we went over chapter 4, composition, design. So that's what Matisse is interested in. He's not interested in telling you a story, an anecdote. He's interested in arranging things, shapes, basically, kind of pretty much two-dimensional shapes, in such a way that the arrangement is pleasing. Okay. Both harmonies and dissonances, that is, clashing, of color can produce agreeable effects. I cannot copy nature in a servile way. That is, I'm not just going to go out there and paint exactly what I see. I'm forced to interpret nature and submit to the spirit of the picture. There must result a living harmony of colors, a harmony analogous to musical composition. And this is a very important idea in early 20th century art. And I'll talk about it if I have time in a minute. The chief function of color should be to serve expression as well as possible. A moment comes when all the parts have found their definite relations, and from then on it would be impossible to add a stroke to my picture without repainting it entirely. So the whole thing has to work together, he's saying, as just an arrangement of colors and shapes and lines. Okay, so I'm out of time now. So you need to watch the videos in the content, take notes from those videos, and I hope you took notes from the lecture, and maybe look at the PDF of the lecture notes. So that's your job, to go out and hunt up some of this information yourself, because I only have an hour to talk about it twice a week. And hopefully I'll see you on Friday. So I'm going to stop recording now.